Hello and welcome back once again to our study in the book of Job. This program is brought to you each Wednesday night at 7 o'clock by the Port Huron Church of Christ, located at 756 17th Street, right here in the city of Port Huron. As we say every week, if you've been with us throughout this study, we thank you for joining with us and just hope, trust, and pray that you are gaining something of significance in your spiritual life as a result of looking at the profound wisdom in this book. And also, if you're just joining with us for the first time, we want to give you an offer. If you have questions about this book that you would like answered, we have a website. And you can write to us at this address, office@porthuronchurchofchrist.org. And in the subject line, just put Job and then write your question, and we will answer it on the air. Also, if you're just joining us and would like to go back and look at this study in its entirety, you can find all of the episodes on porthuronchurchofchrist.org on our website. And then you can watch this at your leisure. Again, we thank you for being a part of this. We are close to wrapping up. We have one more week after this week, and then we will have concluded the study. And again, I thank you and trust, hope, and pray that things have been beneficial as we have studied this together. I want to begin by saying this: be careful what you ask for. Now, we have all heard this from well-meaning individuals warning us or someone else for a statement that could have repercussions deeper than what we are aware. 36 times. Yep, 36 times in the book of Job, Job has called for an audience with God. That's persistence. He wants to make his plea to God of his innocence in hopes of being vindicated from the indictment, this obvious indictment against him and his physical condition, which has overtaken his life. Finally, in this chapter 38, God shows up. And as you suspect, or I should say even well suspect, he gives Job a lot more than he expected. Between you and me, it didn't go well for Job. I don't know what Job had in mind when he was calling for God to show up, but I'm pretty sure this wasn't it. The conversation between Job and God is going to break into two rounds. In round number one, where God is the creator and talks about himself as creator. And in round two, the talk is about the creatures. So what God is going to tell Job, in essence, he's going to give Job a flavor of who he is. And then he's going to talk about the animal world. And then it's all for a point. And I'm going to give you the answer before we get into the study. He's telling Job, in essence, he said, I'm going to tell you a little piece of me, but I'm going to bring it down to your level and talk about these guys here, the animal kingdom. And Job, just so you'll know, if you can't understand them, don't even try to understand me. You don't have the capacity. That was the message. Now, looking at God as creator, both times, in both of these rounds, when God speaks to Job, it is from a storm. I thought that was interesting and worth noting. God always shows up in a storm to him. I think he's letting him know the power is in the house now. You thought when you were talking, in your moments of a little arrogance, that you had the power to sum me. I'm going to show you what power looks like. And God shows up in a storm. Now, what you're going to find in these statements of God, maybe to your surprise, is there's much humor involved in the way that God addresses Job. God reminds Job that he, not Job, is the creator of all things. That he, not Job, is the awesome creating force of everything in the world. And then asked Job, he said, now, can you match that? Imagine now. And this is what I want us to do as an exercise. Put yourself in Job's place for just a minute. Take Job out of the story and input your name there. And it's you having a conversation with God. Maybe things in your life didn't go right as you wanted them to. Maybe somebody even told you some things that proved to be untrue. You know, many people have been told that once they give their lives to Christ, their life is better. I think shortly after you do that, you'll find that to be a very untrue statement. Actually, in some ways, the persecution, according to Jesus, is worse. And it doesn't stop and it doesn't change. It's just the way it is. It's the price that we pay for following God. So, in this case here, God is talking to Job, and I want you to see him as talking to you. The only way sometimes that we can really benefit from Scripture is if we can put ourselves into the Scripture. If there's a scene and we want to experience the scene in its fullness, then we put ourselves there as one of the crowd watching the scene and trying to make it three-dimensional instead of just one-dimensional on a page. In this case, it's a conversation. So imagine now that you're having the conversation with God. So every question that God asked Job, imagine that he's asking you. And every moment when he calls Job into account for some reason or another, imagine that he's talking to you. I think you will find that when you do that, things change dramatically as you read the book. And I guarantee you that once you do that, you'll never forget the experience that you had in the book of Job. We don't want to make this just something you do to waste time. This is a pure look at God, a rare look at God. And all of his majesty and all of his beauty, Job says, look at the God, the creator of the universe. Listen to him talk. And we get to do that. So let's enjoy that together. He also not only asks him, can he match his work? He finishes by asking whether Job is in a position to judge, telling him that it is impertinent or disrespectful for Job to believe that God should explain himself to Job. Now imagine at this point, Job is made to feel really small and very insignificant. So eventually Job replies, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Sometimes we as the tail try to wag the dog. And Job was kind of guilty of doing a little bit of that. It's understandable though. From where he had come to what had happened to him, you can kind of get the feeling that, okay, something happened here, just help me understand it. That's really what he was asking. But in his asking, he got a little arrogant in moments, and that's what God is saying. And now that he's standing face to face with God, there's a new reality. And he, like Isaiah, Isaiah, I should say, like he, came to that same place. I'm worthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. What a strong picture that is. And maybe we should think about those same things in our lives when we want to complain about something concerning God that he's not doing that we think he ought to be doing. Isn't that something? We have the audacity to think that we could dictate what God should be doing. Where do we get that from? I have no idea. But if we could understand how erroneous it is, I think we wouldn't do it. Let's move on. So in the second round, God doesn't talk about himself as creator, but about instead two creatures in particular. And once more, the dialogue is full of humor. God asked Job for his thoughts about the hippopotamus. He calls it, in the ancient, the behemoth, but we know it to be the hippopotamus. And the Leviathan, which we understand to be the crocodile. As if the answer to the great questions about life can be found in these two amazing creatures. And you may ask yourself, why these two, Lamar? And I think that I can give you a little insight, because in the Hebrew world, these two creatures dominated their existence. Leviathan dominated the waters, the sea, and no man could overthrow him. No man could remotely come close to defeating him. And Behemoth was the creature that dominated the land, and no man at this time could defeat him. So God uses these two creatures, these critters, as Granny would call them, to represent the totality of the animal world. And say, let's talk about these. We're going to go to the top of the food chain. We're going to go right to what you know, right to what you understand. So let's talk about these guys here. And uses them as his example about himself. So as I said, Job is being reminded that he can't understand God because he can't understand the animal world. Never mind the mortal world of humanity. We forget about that one. We think about God, we think about animals, but we forget about it also, the mortal world. So the point of God's speech is, why are you, Job, trying to argue with me? What makes you think that you're a match for me? You wanted a court. You wanted a mediator to sit and listen to you present your side, and you wanted me to present my side. What makes you think, young man, that you can do that against me? I created you. I created the animals. I created the universe. Do you even understand who you're talking to? I've watched in our environment where kids, maybe in a learning environment, try to be arrogant and brash and spout something smart aleck at a teacher and almost get the very same response. Who do you think you are talking to me like that? Or a kid to their parent, trying to act like they're smarter than their parent. And the parent said, who do you think you are? And you know, that comment is always coupled with, I brought you in and I'll take you out. But that's another conversation. Let's continue on. So Job replies and comes to the conclusion that God knows all things. No plans of God can be stopped by anyone. Not just any man, anyone, or anything. And he now realizes that his questioning God was totally inappropriate. And he despises himself for doing so. I appreciate that. Because one of the hardest things for us to do is to throw ourselves in reverse and say, I messed up. When we mess up, it's hard to take ownership of that because of pride. And the Bible says that pride goes before what? You got it. Remember it good. A fall. Your pride will always direct you down because it will keep you from doing what you need to do. When you know you need to do it, if we can't overcome our self-pride, it will lead us to destruction. And Job was willing to do this. And in the process of his interaction with God, he says, I forgot who you were. I mean, I didn't forget who you were, that you were God. I forgot who God was. The totality of who you are. And who insignificant me is in relationship to who you are. And he said, I repent in dust and ashes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry so much that I'll put my hand on my mouth and I won't say another word. Although his encounter with God was humiliating for Job, the heart of his problem, to be honest, is dealt with. And now, for Job, he is back in touch with God. I want you to think about this for just a minute and get this, because it's pretty deep and heavy in itself. In calling out God as he did, his frustration grew, and I think, and became arrogant because God was always near to him. And he never felt that he couldn't reach him. But now he said, I checked the four corners of the earth. I can't find him anywhere. And his frustration became arrogance. And now, in realizing this, he says, yeah, I forgot. This is the God that I worshiped. This is the God that I sacrificed to. I have high regard and respect for him. But when he was calling out God, you didn't hear that out of him. You heard him calling out God as we would call out another human being. Now, he saw God as righteous, and he saw God as worthy of vindicating him, but he still forgot that he was calling out God. And now he remembers. But sometimes the bad things work out to our advantage. Anyway, how many times in your life has God taken something seemingly bad and it turned out okay? Sometimes better. And you can almost attribute that thought to this moment because guess what? Job is standing in front of God. He has God's ear. He has God's attention. And he's back in touch with God again. And that moment and this dialogue provides this magnificent climax to the book of Job. In many ways, it tells us that even in our darkest moments, God is still there. Can't see him, can't feel him, can't find him. You talk to him because God is saying, I got it. I got it. Be cool. Just keep trusting in me. I'm ruling everything according to in addition to your little situation. I got you. I'm not going to turn my back on you. I would never do that to you. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. Even though, as human beings, and see, that's where we get that from. Because we do that to each other. We turn our backs on each other. And God is reminding us through the book of Job, I do not change. I do not turn my back on you. When you need me, I'm there. I'm always working. And for your benefit as well. So that's how the book, the crescendo of the book, this great thing that God shows up. After all the banter, after all the anguish, after all the suffering, after all the everything that Job goes through, he has one hurdle left. And it's the largest hurdle of all. He thought his conversations were tough with his friends. He thought it was frustrating with his friends. Now you have to answer to God. And I want to say this as we get ready to read the words of God, which we are going to do. That God isn't gentle with Job. He makes him realize who is whom in this conversation. And I imagine for Job, he never ever forgot again. And for us, if we really apply these words of Job to our life, we won't forget either. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what we really need to do. We get stuck being human beings in our human existence. We feel we're in control until we realize we're out of control. That control is beyond us. At which time we turn to God and say, you're on. I can't handle this. You take care of it now. And then we tell him, now, this is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to do it. And this is when I need it done by. As if, kind of like with Job, as if we have the right to do that to God. And in every single case, God says, oh yeah, you think? You really think that I'm going to show up at your really? You think just because you're telling me to show up that I'm going to show up? I'm God. I created you. One of my, and I gotta say this, because one of my pet peeves is when I see children, little arguing with their parents, as though they have enough knowledge and wisdom to have this conversation with their parents. For some reason, it just drives me nuts, because this parent gives them food and air in their house and a roof and a bed and everything, clothing, everything this child needs. And all of a sudden it feels that it can tell the parent what to do. And I realize that's us. We're that kid many times, and the parent is God. And we kind of have that same attitude. And what Job does for all of us, it reminds us it doesn't work like that. The whole book is telling us, in a nutshell, God does not work like we think he does. God is letting us all know that. And he uses the arguments of each of these guys, of how they see God and how they feel God operates. And he looks at all of them at one point, all four of them, the three friends and Job, and he says, all of you are wrong. And in the end, as I mentioned a few minutes last week, that the friends had to basically offer sacrifice for the things that they said. They were lambasted by God. I'm sorry, Job offered sacrifice for them. But God was not happy with them at all. And he made it clear. And only Job was vindicated from that discussion because, and this is the key, that the takeaway here. Job taught us something. That when the book opened, Job was at a place theologically, as was the three friends. In the end of the book, Job was at a different place theologically, and the friends were still at the same place. Did you hear what I just said? Job was vindicated because his movement was directed towards the way that God wanted him to. And the three friends, their refusal to move was dictated by their attitude, their arrogance, and the wisdom of man, which they claim is the place that they got it. So instead of letting God guide them and change their hearts through the discussion as Job's was, they never changed at all. And in the end, God is going to say, only my servant Job, you three, you were off and wrong about me. It begs the question as I think we're going to run out of time today. I'm sorry for the rant, but it's just some things, some perspectives that we're going to gain here from this moment when God shows up. That we're not going to run past. We're not going to hurry through this. We're going to let God speak to us today. Because every now and then, I think a parent needs to sit down and just talk to their kid straight to the head so that their kid will understand what the parent demands of them. And this is no different, this situation here. It's God now speaking to us. I think it's a great thing to do is to read this periodically so that we always stay calibrated, that we always remember who God is, because that's the first step that gets us in trouble, is forgetting who God is and thinking for one moment that we have any control over him whatsoever. Prayer is not telling God what to do. It's expressing your heart to him. That's all it is. It's from what you say that God acts as he wills. Not because you told him to. It's because he loves us. That's why God does what he does. And so Job has come to this place. And he realizes that now he is standing in front of the man. I've asked for this 36 times. And here he is. And God's not going to, surprisingly enough, answer one of Job's questions. Instead, he tells Job, answer me. Kind of reminds me what Jesus often did when people asked him questions. He kind of dismissed the question and then took the answer to where he wanted it to go so that the person that asked it could learn something. He took it as a teaching moment. For Job, this was a reminding moment. Because remember now, Job was a very devoted man to God. And somewhere along the line, Job had gotten in his head, and I think we do too, that he deserved what he got from God because of the way that he devoted himself to God. He didn't, remember their initial accusation was that Job did what he did because God blessed him. Job never said that. He never once insinuated that on any level, but he did suggest how righteous he was, how he honored God with his life, and as a result of that, God owed him this. And God is telling him, I don't owe you anything. I'm God. Stop feeling that you can control me. For us, we need to stop feeling we can control him. When we read his word and we say, well, I don't care what he says, I'm going to do what I want to do. Okay. He's not going to just rain down lightning on you right now, but you're going to have to answer to that. We have to be careful. That's why I often tell everyone, if you want somebody to play with, go get a toy. But leave God alone. He's too much for all of us. Well, I've said enough. Thank you for allowing me to just open up this discussion, allowing me to set the stage. Because the next speaker is a speaker that demands an entrance. The King of Kings, the Creator, the guy. And when he steps to center stage with the spotlight on him, now asking Job and asking us to give an account, I want us to stand in awe of who he is, of his majesty, of his power, of his holiness, of his righteousness, everything that God is. I want us to literally kneel in front of him as he speaks, because God deserves that from us as his creation. But you're going to have to wait for his words until next week. And then I promise, no talking from me. We're going to hear from God. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for this time we had together. It's almost like a little private moment before this whole thing begins. Before we are going to be just enveloped with God and his wisdom and his greatness and his majesty. So this was a little bit of a mind conditioner, a recalibration, so that we will be prepared for him. And next week, as we get together at this time, I want you to do me a favor. Be ready. Maybe even take 30 minutes before and quiet yourself, because you're not going to hear much from me. God's going to be speaking. And when he speaks, we all need to quiet ourselves, put our hands over our mouths, and listen to the Creator of the universe. God bless you until we meet again next week.